All right, well, welcome to this week's edition of Sizzling Spaces. We are so glad to be here today. We are speaking with Tom. He's our team leader for Color 365. We like to call that the sexy part of the landscapes, to basically draw attention to areas, kind of enhance the curb appeal of properties. There's just so much going on here, Tom. Tell us a little bit about this property with what's going on here, and then we'll get into actually building the pots.
Sure. When I first came to visit the property, the first thing I noticed was all the different shades of perennials that they had planted, the hostas, coral bell, the astilbe. And then I noticed that the entrance receives little to no sunlight. It's very dark. The containers are dark, so my challenge was to bring some brightness and light to the entrance. So a lot of the plants that I chose today that I may or may not use, I think really make that happen. And if you look at the plants in the landscape, they also complement the plants that are part of this property.
One of the things that Tom had said earlier off camera is that we really want to get that pop and guide people to the front. So when they pull in, they see that color and they're curious, and it draws them around the front walkway. So it'll be great to see the before and after shots of this residence.
So some of the plants I brought along are the different coral bells. I brought some astilbe, some different grasses, hostas, pechysandra. I did bring some house plants, the dracaena and the sansevieria. Now, one of the advantages of using perennials and houseplants in the containers is at the end of the season, this could be brought indoors for a house plant. A perennial is another investment in your landscape. Okay, so it's really important when you plant up containers to use a potting mix. A lot of times I'll go to an installation and the container is full of a topsoil or a garden mix, and this is the perfect planting medium for annuals, tropicals, and perennials. A lot of times the garden soil and the topsoil are really heavy and there's some clay in there and it's really hard on the root system. This is lighter. There's some nutrients in here, and it allows for really good drainage.
All right, one of the other aspects as Tom's kind of getting stuff ready here is the ongoing care and maintenance. It can look great right away, but how do you maintain that as the plant material takes nutrients out of the small amounts of soil? We have a BYO compost tea, and basically we talked about that with Jason a few weeks ago, but we have this at the showroom, which is awesome. It's basically the same tea we brew, and there's a little packet that comes with it. Comes in 2.5 gallon jugs, and then you add the food and feed it, and then basically water your planters with it. And that's been known to do a wonderful job on the root systems. It's going to give you longer bloom times, healthier plants when they're in such a small condensed area. So this is something that we suggest doing every couple of weeks, to just water them in with that to really get living, breathing, active soil so the roots are in their happy place.
So another tip, a lot of times I will go to a job site and I notice that when they plant their containers, they plant them really deep. I typically go about 1 inch below the edge. That way when you plant the plant, you're showcasing the plant versus hiding it. So now that I've started this container with the house plant, I'm going to start adding color. To do that, I remove the fuchsia from the growing container, and you need to agitate the root system a little bit so that the roots want to grow into the potting mix.
And for some of you, it's real easy if you're good at agitating people. You're pretty good at probably agitating the roots too, right?
One of the current trends is to add plants into containers that benefit wildlife. So in this case, this upright fuchsia sends out a trumpet flower that are attractive to hummingbirds. You can plant lantana, verbena. Those would attract butterflies. Another thing that I tell people when I plant is I always look at how the plant is growing in a container, and that helps me determine how it's going to end up in the container. Obviously, if I put this one this way, it doesn't have the same impact as if I put it this way. This is more attractive. And the veining in this vining plant, the dark purple is playing off the container and the dark leaves. So in a situation like this, I go heavy on the front that you're going to see, and I won't plant anything in the back because you won't be able to see that anyway. Because there's a mix of 3 containers, I won't repeat this recipe. I'll play out again the color that's in there and just use other plants. So now to bring the chartreuse, I'm using these canary wing begonias. It's a great plant, one of my favorites. The more sunlight, the more yellow, the more shade, the more green. But when the astilbe are blooming red, they'll complement this red. So one of the reasons I think people like to use the Color 365 program is a lot of times clients will tell me, I love containers, I just don't like the way they turn out. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think I have a green thumb. So part of what we offer is the design eye and knowledge of the plants. There's several ways you can do it too. We can do a on-site visit. You can send in photos, and in that case we would then do a recipe card for you. You could then stop in, pick up the plants, and go home and follow the instructions on this card, and then plant up your own containers.
Tom, with those photos you're talking about,
Yes.
it's probably, from what I'm hearing you say, pretty important they take like some wide angle lenses of the surrounding landscape to
Right.
give you a better feel of what would actually tie in and work, correct?
Right. And they want to include dimensions, and then the sun, is it sun, shade, part sun, and that helps us determine the plants that we would use for that application. Another thing I'll do sometimes too is manipulate the growing medium so it fits in the plan. This one I'm squishing a little bit, but I did agitate the roots because I want to get some of this dark in here. So we're on to the last container to finish this set. And to me there's already a lot going on, although I think they complement each other really well. A little bit of chartreuse here is playing off the big amount of it up on top. So this container I want to keep a little bit simpler. Now this is another one where I'm using a perennial. So at the end of the year, around September, Labor Day-ish, when these would be changed out to fall, then you could plant this in your yard. So again, it's a one-time investment for your property. On the left side, I noticed there's a doorbell. So I don't want to go too high so that when guests arrive at the property, they can't find the doorbell. I love the Sansevieria. I like how it really plays off all the coloration we have here. Again, when the season is over, this now can become a house plant for the homeowner. Again, I'm going to leave it in the container so that in the fall it's easier for them to move indoors. Another one of my favorite plants to use for containers is Creeping Jenny or Lysimachia. Again, the more sunlight, the more yellow, the more shade, the more green. But again, I think this really complements the edge of the Sansevieria. So I'm going to use this coleus on this side. This one we'll want to fill in and also hang down, cascade down. So I'm kind of encouraging it to grow that way by the placement of the plant. Now some people might think this is overkill because I'm using 2. You really don't have to, but I really have always been big on instant impact, and I don't have patience to wait for the finished result.
Yeah, a lot of times you see people plant or even professionals plant, and it's 2 months before you can enjoy the pots and its impact. So it makes a lot of sense why you do that, Tom.
Wojovenka. So this last Creeping Jenny or Lysimachia will finish out this container. And again, people are probably thinking, why am I using so many? But I guess I'm looking more for that instant impact. And because these are a perennial, they can incorporate this into their landscape design if they choose. I believe they're having a party this weekend, so this way they won't have to wait for the full impact of the design. So it doesn't interfere with the doorbell, even if, as this continues to get taller. When this coleus fills in and trails down, it'll add more of the burgundy to the chartreuse.
Oh, that's gorgeous, Tom.
So in addition to residential, we also do commercial clients.
Tell us about one of your favorite commercial projects,
Absolutely.
Tom.
So recently we helped Urban Evolutions do the front of their outside.
Okay.
And what inspired that design was they purchased some bamboo. So it was a play off a little bit of a Japanese feel
Okay.
In the north, and then 3 different colors. So,
Well, we are going to have to make a road trip and take a look at that site, definitely. I can't wait to see it.
the other thing that we can do through Color 365 is yesterday I helped with the wedding. The wedding is today. She and I met. She gave me the color palette for the wedding. I was showing her some lilac and some azalea that were in the color palette of her wedding. I told her it was a little bit more, but then when the wedding was over, they could incorporate those into the landscape, and she thought it was a great idea.
Oh, absolutely. I
reminding them of the wedding.
What a wonderful keepsake, too, to have plants and displays that were at your wedding actually to enjoy year after year at your
In
new
your
home
yard.
together.
A lot of questions I get asked are, how do we maintain them? So one thing we will give you at the end of the installation is a little care brochure. It walks you through fertilizing, watering, pruning if necessary. The other service we offer is if you go on vacation for a long weekend or a week, we would come over and address the containers while you are gone. A moisture meter is something you can buy. A lot of times people say they stick their finger in the container and they're like, oh, it's wet, or oh, it's dry. But this helps get all the way down to the roots. And this meter indicates, like in this case, it's saying it's dry. These are about $10, and it's really, really helpful if you struggle with the watering. But in most cases in the summer, especially if the containers are in the sun, you have to water at least once a day.
Tom, that can looks modified a little
is
bit.
modified.
Tell us a little
It
bit
is
about the
modified.
modified watering can.
So one of my frustrations too is I'll go back to people's homes and they'll say, I'm watering, and then I have them demonstrate for me, and what they're really doing, normally a watering can has a rose on the end with the holes in, and they always go like this, and it looks like you're giving the plants a shower, or what I call baptizing. And what you really want to do is you want to get that water down into the soil and the container and the roots. A large container like this in the sun, I would easily water a full container. Smaller ones, probably a half a container. But again, you have to do it at least once a day. Make sure you water and not baptize.
All
Now, the
right.
shade containers, especially because these don't get a lot of sun, I will water them in thoroughly, and then she probably can go about a week. The other information that we share with you is the indication plants. So I will let Sherry know that if she notices the coleus in this arrangement and in this arrangement, if they would start to wilt, then she probably needs to water. Or in some of the sun arrangements, a lot of the million bells or sweet potato vine are your first indicators that you need to water the plants.
So, Tom, thanks again for your time, and we will see you in our next edition of Sizzling Spaces. All right, after talking with Tom and the commercial sites, we figured we'd bring you to Urban Evolutions. Right here in Appleton off of College Avenue, great business. Tom did the front arrangements here, as you can see. and his team. And I just want to give a shout out to Tom and Molly and Susan and just the team of Color 365. They do an awesome job, as you can see. Feel free to stop by Urban Evolutions. It's going to look fantastic right now, of course, but in about a month, it's only going to get better.